Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you the story of Tien and Jack. After selling out their very first batch of bon rom at the market, the feeling of joy still lingered in every step Tien and Jack took on their way home. It was not just the simple happiness of selling everything, but also the feeling of creating something with their own hands and having it accepted by others for the very first time. For Tien, each cake was not merely food, it was her effort, her belief, everything she had poured into it. Seeing them all sold out made her feel, more clearly than ever, her own value, something she had never fully experienced before. As for Jack, standing beside her and watching her radiant smile, he felt a certain sense of reassurance. At least, amidst all the complications surrounding them, he knew Tien had found a direction that truly suited her. At the same time, the issues involving Ms. Thursday and the piece of land were far from over. Although some initial details had been clarified, Jack understood that what lay ahead was still complicated. That was why he had asked Luan to continue investigating more deeply, hoping to gain a clearer view of the entire situation. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees in the yard, the surroundings still quiet, Tien gently woke up. She did not wake anyone else, quietly beginning her familiar routine. Unlike her initial awkwardness, everything now flowed much more smoothly. The ingredients she had prepared the night before were neatly arranged again. The soaked sticky rice had become soft and elastic, the mung beans were perfectly steamed and fluffy, and the meat filling was carefully seasoned to achieve a balanced flavor. Her movements were now more confident, no longer hesitant like before. She wrapped each cake evenly and carefully, making the finished bon rom look more uniform and appealing compared to the first batch. Watching the results gradually take shape, a sense of hope grew within her, though a small worry still lingered about whether today would be as successful as yesterday. Out on the porch, Jack stood quietly observing everything. His gaze followed not only Tien's movements, but also carried deeper thoughts. Luan's words from the phone call the day before still echoed in his mind, each detail something he could not ignore. A large real estate company, backed by Ms. Hoa, a well-known name in the property world, was quietly targeting the land near Xianban Bridge. What troubled Jack most was that his mother's 2 plots of land could very well be the final pieces needed to complete their plan. He understood that when the final pieces became important, the pressure and hidden calculations behind them would not be simple. That realization brought him a sense of unease, even though outwardly he remained calm as usual. "Jack, what are you thinking about, staring at me like that?" Tien's voice suddenly brought him back to reality. She turned around with a gentle smile, her eyes carrying a familiar warmth. That smile softened Jack for a moment, and he lightly shook his head, as if trying to push away the heavy thoughts in his mind. "It's nothing. I was just thinking you'll probably sell out again today." His words were simple, yet filled with encouragement. Tien smiled softly in response, though a hint of uncertainty still lingered in her eyes. "I wonder if today will be as good as yesterday." She voiced her concern honestly, knowing that success is not always easy to repeat. Yet that very worry made her more careful and determined in everything she did. Jack stepped closer, his voice lower but filled with confidence. "As long as you do it with all your heart, people will feel it." The words were not elaborate, but they were enough to steady Tien. She said nothing more, simply nodded and continued finishing the remaining cakes, as if she had found a source of strength right beside her. When everything was ready, Tien set out for the market, continuing the journey she had just begun. As Jack watched her leave, his thoughts returned to the unresolved concerns in his mind. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Luan. "Jack, I've just found some important information." Luan's voice sounded urgent, as if things were moving faster than expected. Jack immediately focused, his expression turning serious. That company really belongs to Ms. Hoa. But it's not just about buying land, they're deliberately creating pressure to force the price down as low as possible. Those words made Jack tighten his grip on the phone. Each sentence confirmed the suspicions he had already been carrying. You mean, they know the land is under dispute and are taking advantage of it? He asked, his voice low but firm. Exactly. And if this isn't handled soon, your mother could suffer a major loss. The atmosphere around him seemed to grow heavier in that moment. Jack remained silent for a few seconds, not because he didn't understand, but because he was carefully weighing everything he had just heard. He knew this was not simply about money or a piece of land. Behind it were matters of dignity, relationships, and things that could not easily be traded away. After a brief pause, Jack finally spoke, his voice now more decisive. Thank you. I'll handle it. That noon, as the market gradually became busier, with stalls filling up and people moving back and forth, Tien stood behind her small cake stall, carefully arranging each bon ram in neat rows. The green banana leaves wrapped around the cake stood out gently under the soft midday sunlight, creating a simple yet inviting display. After a fairly successful morning of selling, her confidence was clearly stronger than on the first day. Yet deep inside, she still remained cautious, as if she did not want her joy to make her careless. At that moment, among the passing crowd, a well-dressed woman suddenly stopped in front of her stall. Her presence made the small space around the stall seem to pause for a brief moment. Her elegant outfit, confident demeanor, and observant gaze made Tien slightly surprised, but she maintained her polite and gentle attitude. Did you make these yourself? The woman asked, her voice calm but carrying clear interest. Tien nodded lightly, her tone modest. Yes, I've only started making them a few days ago. Her answer was simple, yet sincere. The woman did not respond immediately. She picked up one cake and examined it carefully, the wrapping, the shape, the consistency, before taking a small bite and slowly tasting it. For Tien, that moment felt longer than usual. She stood still, not daring to say anything, quietly waiting for the woman's reaction. Many thoughts passed through her mind, hope mixed with worry, as if all her efforts were being weighed on an invisible scale. After a moment, the woman gave a faint smile. It was not too obvious, but enough to ease Tien's tension. It's good. Would you like to sell in large quantities? The question came unexpectedly, making Tien pause. She had never thought about producing her cakes in large quantities, as everything had only just begun from a very small step. I've just started, so I haven't really thought about that yet. Her answer remained honest, without trying to impress or rush into something she didn't fully understand. The woman seemed to notice that. She did not appear rushed, but calmly took out a business card and handed it to Tien. If you're interested, I can place orders for a chain of stores. But the quality must stay like this. Her words were clear and firm, yet not pressuring. It felt like an opportunity being opened, along with a requirement for consistency and seriousness. Tien reached out to take the card, feeling her heartbeat quicken. She looked at the small card in her hand, then back at the woman, a mix of emotions rising within her. This was something she had never imagined, an opportunity arriving so suddenly that it made her both excited and slightly overwhelmed. Still, she did not rush to respond, only nodded gently as a sign of appreciation. The woman did not stay long after that. She left, blending into the busy crowd, leaving Tien standing there with the card in her hand and thoughts still unfinished. From that moment on, her cake-selling work no longer felt as simple as before. It had opened a new direction, though she still needed time to fully understand and consider it. That afternoon, as the sunlight softened, Jack came to pick her up as usual. The moment she saw him from afar, her eyes lit up with excitement. As soon as he stopped, she eagerly told him everything, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Jack, someone wants to order my cakes in large quantities." Her excitement spread to Jack. He listened, his eyes gradually lighting up, recognizing the important step she had just taken. "Really? That means you can develop this further." His words carried clear encouragement. But shortly after, his expression subtly turned more serious. The change was slight, but Tien noticed. She looked at him, her gaze softening, as if trying to understand what was on his mind. "As for me, I might have to deal with something complicated soon." Jack's voice was calm, yet serious. He did not go into details, but Tien could sense the weight of it. She did not press him or show worry, only spoke gently. "No matter what it is, I believe you can handle it." Her words were simple, yet they felt like emotional support. Jack did not respond immediately, but his eyes softened slightly, as if some of the pressure inside him had eased. That night, when everything had quieted down, Jack took the initiative to call Ms. Loy and arrange a meeting with Ms. Thursday. This meeting was different from the previous ones. It was no longer just about gathering information, but about directly confronting the situation that was gradually unfolding. At the meeting, the atmosphere was initially subdued. Jack spoke first, presenting everything he and Luan had discovered. Each piece of information was delivered clearly, without exaggeration, yet enough to make the listeners think deeply. When they heard about someone secretly trying to take over the land, both Miss Thursday and Ms. Loy could not hide their shock. What they had previously believed now seemed to have an entirely different explanation. "So, all this time we've been pushed into a difficult position because someone has been manipulating things behind the scenes?" Ms. Loy asked, her voice filled with surprise. Jack nodded slightly, his gaze more resolute. "But if our documents are legitimate, no one can take it away from us." His words were not just a statement, but also reassurance. Even though the situation was complicated, at least they still had something solid to rely on. The atmosphere in the room grew more tense, yet also clearer than ever. No longer scattered doubts, everything was beginning to connect into a complete picture. The three of them sat there in silence, but it was not a silence of uncertainty, rather one of agreement. They understood that from this moment on, none of them could stand alone. To overcome what lay ahead, they would have to stand together, united, and face whatever was coming next. In the days that followed, when everything was no longer just suspicion or speculation, Jack and Luan entered a more serious and structured phase of working with the local authorities. The atmosphere of those working sessions was far from simple, as every detail had to be carefully examined. Each document and every piece of information needed to be cross-checked with precision. Jack understood that even the smallest mistake could render all previous efforts meaningless, so he and Luan remained cautious and patient, moving forward step by step. All documents related to the land were thoroughly reviewed again. Papers that once seemed familiar were now examined more carefully than ever. Every stamp, every signature, and every timeline was compared against relevant sources. At times, the atmosphere during these sessions became tense, but within that tension, things gradually became clearer. Thanks to the transparency and completeness of the documents, each issue was resolved one by one. Points that had once been unclear were now explained in detail. There were no longer any gaps that could raise doubts. The entire process related to the land was gradually clarified with confirmation from the authorities. This not only gave Jack and Luan greater confidence, but also provided a solid foundation to protect the legitimate rights of the family. At the same time, the unusual signs from the company were no longer hidden as before. When all the information was placed side by side, their plan to create pressure and force the price down became increasingly evident. What had once been speculation now had concrete evidence. This shifted the situation, no longer passive, but moving into a more proactive position. When everything was finally resolved, the atmosphere in the family became much lighter. Ms. Loy was the one who felt this change most clearly. The days of worry and tension seemed to fade away. She let out a long breath, filled with relief, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Miss Thursday stood beside her, unable to hide her emotions. When everything became clear, she gently held Jack's hand. The grip was not tight, but it expressed everything she wanted to say. "I'm truly grateful to you." Her voice was slow and sincere. It was not just a thank you, but also an acknowledgement of the efforts Jack had quietly made all this time. Hearing that, Jack simply smiled gently, a calm yet steady smile. "What matters is that we still trust each other." His response was brief, but it touched the core of everything. Because beyond solving the issue itself, what truly allowed them to reach this outcome was the trust they had maintained. Meanwhile, in another part of the story, Tutien's life was also gradually changing for the better. From the unexpected opportunity at the market that day, she began receiving her first orders. At first, they were small, but enough for her to realize that the path she had chosen was the right one. The simple bon rom, made from familiar ingredients, were no longer just food, they had become a stable source of income. Day by day, her work became more organized. From preparing ingredients to cooking and packaging, everything was done carefully and consistently. She no longer felt the uncertainty of the early days. Instead, she became more proactive and confident in what she was doing. The cakes not only retained their original flavor but also became more visually appealing and uniform, proof of her progress. It was not just about income, but also a quiet sense of pride she created for herself. A simple pride, not loud or showy, but enough to make her feel stronger on the path ahead. One afternoon, as the sunlight softened, the two of them stood in front of the house, quietly looking out at the green garden. The space was so peaceful that even the gentle breeze could be clearly felt. After everything they had gone through, that moment felt more valuable than ever. Jack spoke softly, his voice calm yet relieved. "Maybe, after everything, things are finally okay." It was not an absolute statement, but rather a reflection after all the ups and downs they had experienced. Standing beside him, Tien simply smiled, a warm, gentle smile. "Because we've always been together." Her answer was simple, yet deeply meaningful. It wasn't that things had become easy on their own, but that they had always stood side by side, overcoming every challenge together. The soft afternoon sunlight spread across the yard and the garden, creating a rare sense of peace. It was not just the closing of a turbulent journey, but also the beginning of a new one, where trust, effort, and sincere affection would continue to guide them forward. Please stay tuned for the next videos on my channel.
Xin chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến video về câu chuyện của Jack và Tử Tiên mọi người nhé. Bây giờ thì mình đang làm video và mình đang viết câu lệnh để tạo hình khung với mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem video của mình nhé. Mình sẽ hoàn thành và đăng tải video sớm. Chào tạm biệt mọi người, hẹn gặp lại mọi người.